Doppelganger by Naomi Klein is ostensibly about Naomi Klein's experience of being repeatedly mistaken for Naomi Wolf. Both are middle-aged Jewish thinkers with big hair responsible for influential books that bookended the 90s. There's The Beauty Myth from Wolf and No Logo from Klein. Now, getting mistakenly attributed on a bunch of tweets hardly seems worth getting worked up about, let alone writing an entire book. But things started to get concerning when Wolf took a headlong tumble into the alt-right. She becomes a regular guest on Steve Bannon's The War Room, a favorite of Tucker Carlson, and becomes this staunch anti-vax advocate. Vaccines, in fact, were a software platform capable of taking uploads, all in service of a large ploy by a bunch of transnational actors intent on sterilizing people, turning children into drones, and otherwise undermining the Constitution. Wolf had her own unique spin on this. Masks also inhibit the smile reflex in children, and that people who actually had the vaccine no longer had a scent, something to do with lipid nanoparticles in the mRNA vaccine. No idea. Even after COVID started to subside, Wolf kept up with the crazy, saying things like clouds weren't real and were in fact evidence of geoengineered skies, which I don't even know what that means. So it becomes increasingly important for Klein to distance and differentiate herself from Wolf. And again, Klein notes that it is somewhat ironic that she would be so invested in her own personal brand, she who wrote something called No Logo, but this is just an entry point into examining larger factors at play, and she descends deep into the rabbit hole and takes us along for the ride. We are a culture obsessed with doppelgangers, from Jekyll and Hyde to Dorian Gray, but even closer to home, all of us in this current connected, social media saturated world are well versed in presenting this alternate version of ourselves. On Instagram, we present a more polished, worldly, fabulously cool and collected, curated version of ourselves to maximize our currency in this attention economy. Or YouTube, for example, where we might present ourselves as, let's say, a reader, a thoughtful raconteur, an approachable bookish champion, a literary bon vivant, for example. Now, this focus on the individual doppelganger extends out, and Klein explores this idea as it applies to politics and society. Let's stick with the individual for a bit. Wolf is our entry point into what Klein refers to as the mirror world, and Klein is pretty certain she knows what Wolf's canon event was that led to her red pilling and eventual rightward slide, her mirror world origin story. The year is 2019, and Wolf is out promoting her latest book, Outrages, Sex, Censorship, and the Criminalization of Love, based on her doctoral thesis. She's having an interview live on BBC when the host corrects her and says, death recorded actually means the sentence was commuted as opposed to carried out, which conflicts with Wolf's research that stated during Victorian English times, homosexual men were often executed for the crime of sodomy. Reviewers would subsequently find other errors in the book, and the US publisher pulls the book entirely. Wolf is savaged online, mocked on Twitter, and basically becomes a persona non grata to the left. This all happens the same year her father dies, and it is a lot. And Klein wryly notes that the left, for all its talk of inclusion and caring, is more than eager to turn on its own, to always be policing its borders, ready to come at them with a righteous takedown or a smug banishment for any or all little misstep, thereby shrinking their ranks. Meanwhile, the right is more than happy to welcome anyone shunned by the left. Wolf is welcomed in a world where mistakes don't matter, and fact-checkers are just finger-wagging elitists. Wolf is just one of many canceled folks, disappeared from our little liberal bubbles, only to be delionized over on Newsmax, Rumble, Truth Social, and X. This vast network of right-wing media that's filling in the gaps as traditional journalism flounders. And Wolf's experience is something that is repeated over and over again. It follows a simple equation that Klein notes, basically narcissism plus social media addiction plus midlife crisis divided by public shaming equals right-wing meltdown. And Klein listens to all the right-wing media, so I don't have to. She binges episodes of Bannon's War Room. It gets to a point where it's a bit of a problem. She agrees to abstain entirely during a family vacation so she can spend more time with her family, but eventually finds herself pulled over at the side of the road alone in her car, binging episodes of the podcast. We're used to dismissing this brand of crazy and just completely blocking it out of our lives. But Klein goes in and binges on the stuff and comes out with a few revelations of her own. Most interesting is this idea that conspiracy theorists get the facts wrong, but the feelings right. Most of us feel like we're being lied or manipulated, but the difference between the right and the left is who's doing the lying and to what purpose. So political elites beholden to corporate interests becomes a cabal of pedophiles intent on instilling a world government. Globalists in the World Economic Forum helpfully diverts attention away from capitalism as a broken system and keeps most global billionaires intact. Climate change is the weaponization of science to prevent growth and change our lifestyle. And the right becomes really good at also appropriating the left's language. During COVID, they repurposed the left-wing slogans of "I can't breathe" and "My body, my choice." Things just get completely insidious when you consider right-wing theories and their similarities to indigenous policies. So, replacement theory versus manifest destiny. QAnon's fixation with institutionalized child abuse and pedophilia meet residential schools. Pandemic? Say hello to smallpox and infected blankets. And the thing is, when the right appropriates certain terms, it booby-traps them, it trivializes them, it becomes something that the left won't even consider. So while there should have been skepticism around China's explanation for the origins of the virus, as soon as the right got a hold of the term lab leak, that suddenly became something that the left couldn't even consider. Bill Gates should have been vilified for his defense of pharmaceutical companies and their applying patents to the vaccines instead of making them open source. But all of that was overshadowed by the conspiracy that he manufactured the virus and was buying up farmland to depopulate the earth. So the scandals that we know about, like capitalism and billionaire oligarchs, privacy concerns, and climate change, they just get overshadowed by these wild, explosive conspiracy theories. These things that, like Klein notes, gets the vibes right, but the facts, oh, so wrong. All of this is a powerful tool of division and distraction that only benefits elites. We're just so busy fighting amongst ourselves, dunking on each other, owning the libs, fact-checking the right, that we miss the opportunity for collective action, for working together, to collaborate. Klein notes that we are soft on structures and hard on people when the opposite needs to be true. We need to be hard, critical of structures, and softer on people. But we live in a world of individualism where we could be preppers hoarding toilet paper or guns, or suburban liberals who think their consumer choices can make a difference, that buying a paper straw will absolve them of any responsibility. We live in a messy, divisive, noisy world. And Klein thinks maybe calm is a force of resistance. That calm is a precondition of focus, and focus allows us to prioritize and maybe even learn to work together. Doppelganger, I really enjoyed, and I kind of dig on this type of read because we have this tendency to close ourselves off from the crazies, to be smug in our rational worldview that closes us off to others. And I think there's an opportunity to widen that lens and take on a more empathetic view. And if you're into this sort of thing, I highly recommend the New York Times podcast, Rabbit Hole, which I thought was fantastic. And for the best description of algorithmic persuasion that leads to a downward tumble into conspiracy theories and right-wing nonsense, I highly recommend Nathan Hill's Wellness. 5-star read. Absolutely loved it. Anyway, I think things are going to get crazy in the mirror world here in North America with the elections looming on the horizon in the United States and Canada. So steel yourself. Anyway, January, time for hibernation. I'm getting a lot of reading under my belt in preparation for the spring where traveling descends upon me again. So tell me what you're reading that you're enjoying or what you're looking forward to in the near future. I need to add to my TBR pile. I'd love to hear your suggestions. That's it for me this week. We'll talk to you again soon.